This is a PowerPoint on the first ever buffed cards. If you didn't know, Rise of the Mechs was released in Rise of Shadows. It is the first time we have ever seen an actual buff patch in Hearthstone. We've seen a lot of different nerf patches, but this was the first ever time we've seen buffs. So, let's go through some of them. Of course, we can start with Druid, as always, but yikes. Treant Druid was actually really good in Rise of Shadows. You had cards like Call of the Ancients, which were really good at buffing, and you had the Twin Spell 8 mana card that would summon 5 Treants, and it was actually just really good at the time. The issue is, Mulch Muncher was still only 9 mana. It would eventually get buffed to 8 mana again, and then it was pretty decent in these Treant Druid decks, but at 10 and 9 mana, Mulch Muncher was just not very good. It didn't really see any play whatsoever, and that's awkward, right? For a card to be like Mulch Muncher and see absolutely no play in Treant decks. Very, very, very rough. Then you have Gloop Sprayer, and I mean, this card's just... It's a niche combo card that's used for, really bad combos that eventually just got completely replaced by Sathrovar, because Sathrovar is just objectively a better card at everything Gloop Sprayer wants to do, so it's really awkward. And then Sathrovar was just eventually, power crept by Shattered Reflections, but Shattered Reflections was eventually nerfed because of ENR, different story. So Druid really didn't get much from this Rise of the Mechs thing. It's a little awkward, if you ask me, that, Druid just somehow didn't really benefit much, but it happens. Not every class was treated equally in this list, as will go down. Then you have Hunter, which got Necromechanic and Flark's Boomzooka buffed. Necromechanic has been tried to make work ever since it's been buffed. It has a slightly better body than Baron Rivendare, and Baron Rivendare is already not that good of a card. It's just worse than Bran. I don't know why Rivendare is 4 mana, I really don't. Bran being 3 is pretty significant, but whatever. So Necromechanic at 5 and then 4. If you want to experiment, it's always worse to play Necromechanic than it is to play something like Yelling Yodeler nowadays, or just Feign Death, or Play Dead, things like that. It's just always going to be worse. The only combo I can think of where Necromechanic does sometimes matter is Porcupine, the Augmented Porcupine in Hunter. Sometimes you can make it work for that deck, but that deck's not good, and it hasn't been good ever. It's just a complete downgrade to Knuckles Hunter, and Knuckles Hunter's already not that great. Then you have Flark's Boomzooka. It's bad. I mean, it going from 8 to 7 mana is a significant buff because you can play Maxima into War Rider Rivendare. Funny that Rivendare is affected by both of these changes, the new copy. And that's the best way you can play Flark's Boomzooka. You can play Maxima on 6, Flark's on 7, win the game. The issue is, it's bad. Hunter doesn't really have any good ways to actually survive the early game without minions. Hunter's minions are a lot better than Hunter's spells, so if you're only running 2 minions in your entire deck, Maxima and Rivendare, you're not having a good time. It's just really awkward. I wish that Flark's Boomzooka would specify highest cost minions, because then, it would be a lot better, significantly better. Same with Maxima. If they specified highest cost minion, it would be significantly better, because you could actually run, your good cards. I know, that's shocking, right? That Hunter wants to run its good cards. I feel like I have authority to say this, too, that Boomzooka is really bad, because I hit top 500 with Boomzooka Hunter. You can find it on Hearthstone decks. It's under my old name, not Flare, but it's something. I also hit 500 wins at the same time, which is why I wanted to post it. It's just really funny. It's just not a good deck by any means. Then you have Mage. Unexpected results. Expectedly, didn't have any results post-buff. Haha, that's funny. Anyway, Luna's Pocket Galaxy is the really big one you gotta talk about when you're talking about this buff patch. Luna's Pocket Galaxy is by far the best card in this list once it got buffed to 5 mana. I say that because it eventually got reverted to 7 mana, and it was still pretty good at 7 mana because people realized, if it's really good at 5 mana, it's probably good enough at 7 mana. It's one of those things that happens where, sometimes something gets buffed and then it gets reverted, and people are like, oh wait, it was still actually quite good, and that's what happened to Luna's Pocket Galaxy. That being said, Luna's just unreal levels of powerful at 5 mana. It's the first ever card to get reverted. It's just really, really... I'm sorry, reverted from being buffed, I should say. It's just really strong for what it could do. I mean, if your entire deck costs 1 mana instead of, 3 million mana because you run a lot of expensive cards, it's obvious that Luna was going to be very good. Then we have Paladin. Paladin actually did benefit from its buffs. Glowstone Technician saw some play in Handmode Vex and Wild. Of course, eventually got, better cards, so Glowstone Technician kind of faded out. But the real kicker is Christology. Christology is the best card from this list that still has its buff intact. I say that because 2 cards have been reverted. Christology is still the best card, though, because giving Paladin access to 1 mana draw 2 is huge. The 1 attack minions you're drawing are very good. You draw your Knight of Anointment, you would draw Samuro, you would draw... what's it called? The 3 mana 1/4 that was Lifesteal Battlecry, deal its attack to an enemy minion. That card was really good because, of course, you would buff it. These are both just really good cards for hand buff decks. Christology drawing 1 attack cards doesn't really feel as bad because, well, you hand buff it. It used to be good with... what's it called? It's the Gadget Zan 2 mana 1/1 that would Battlecry, give your hand +1/+1. It was eventually, but that card was eventually buffed to 2 mana 2/2, which actually nerfed Christology. If that card went to like a 2 mana 1/3, it'd probably be good again. But that's really rough to see a card get buffed for standard in the core set, but is actually just a straight up overall nerf to the card because it wasn't that good in standard. It's like a fine card, but it really killed that card's viability in wild. What is it called? 1 second. Grime Street Outfitter. That's what it's called. Sorry. I just couldn't remember the name of the card. Then we have Priest. Priest, again, got some actually pretty big buffs. Cloning Device at 1 mana did see some fringe play throughout its time in Standard. Of course, all these cards had, rotated with Boomsday, so they didn't get that much time to last with their buffs, but it was still a pretty decent card that did see some play. The real kicker is, of course, Extra Arms. This is the other card that was reverted from this set. It went from 3 to 2 mana and was really strong. With High Priest Amet that came out in Saviors All Doom, the 4 mana 2/7 that would, after you play a minion, give its health equal to Amet's. You would buff the shit out of Amet. Extra Arms helped a lot because it was just really flexible. It was cheap. It gave you just so much to do. You could play it with just so much. It was just so good with Amet that it got nerfed again back to 3 mana and just killed the card completely. I think Extra Arms can easily go back to 2 mana today. It's just really nice. Talking about that buff priest is a little hard because I never played it. I will straight up admit I never played that buff priest. I was just playing Reno Hunter and Reno Hunter and Reno Hunter and nothing else. So I don't really remember how good that buff priest was. I just know it was good enough to get nerfed, so that does say a lot. Then you have Rogue. Man, Rogue did not actually get buffed. Pogo Hopper going from 2 to 1 mana didn't matter at all. Really, really sad. The only upside to this is nowadays you can play it with Sonya Water Dancer, actually, and, you get an extra Pogo Hopper. That's not great, but it's not terrible. It's pretty nice. And then, Violet Haze, dude, read this card. 2 mana. Add 2 random Death Battle cards to your hand. Make an educated guess if you think that card ever saw any amount of play. Just educated guess. If you voted or thought, no, obviously it would never see any play. Wow, shocking. Am I right? Obviously, Violet Haze is one of the worst cards ever printed. Like, it's such a pack filler card that I'm surprised they even chose it. It's something, all right. Then we have Shaman with, of course, the Stormbringer. I spoke about how, after his buff, it was pretty decent, and even Shaman, not an amazing card, just it got replaced, like, as soon as possible, but it was still a pretty decent card. The real one, though, is Thunderhead. Thunderhead is huge. Thunderhead was genuinely a absurdly powerful card for this era of Shaman. Every single Shaman deck was trying to build around Thunderhead. You wanted to get as much value from Thunderhead as possible. You had a lot of 0 and 1 mana overload cards that would benefit incredibly well. You had, what's it called? You had Lightning Bloom at the time. It was in Standard. Before the nerf even, you could still use it with Thunderhead. It was just really good. Thunderhead Shaman was absurd. It could build its own board. It could clear the board. It could, I don't really know. It just did a lot of stuff. You could build a board, buff it, clear your opponents, do all this stuff, and then, you're overloaded, which you could just You had Vicina in Old Doom, which would benefit from your overload. It's just real good. It's just real good, Thunderhead. It did so much. If you played during this era, you completely remember Thunderhead. It's just such a good card. Then we have Warlock. Warlock is a funny case because Spirit Bomb going from 2 to 4 or 2 to 1 mana on paper didn't really matter. It didn't really make much of a difference until you had Dark Glare and the quest line come out. Then it was amazing. Spirit Bomb is one of the best cards ever because of those 2 cards. Like, yeah. You can be like, oh yeah, Spirit Bomb's not that great. It's 1 mana, deal 4 to a minion. Like, that alone is pretty good. And then deal 4 to your hero is really good because it refreshes mana, it discounts your giants, and then, of course, with the quest line, you get closer to completing. The old quest line was like 6, 7, 8 for how much you had to complete it. So this would almost complete the first stage of your quest line. It was just disgusting. Absolutely disgusting card. Dr. Morgan got a -2 mana buff, and it's still one of the worst legendaries to ever exist. What does that say about this card? For a card to go from 8 to 6 mana and still be worthless is just like, man, this card is so terrible. Why did they even print it? It's just, like, why? Genuinely, what was the point of Dr. Morgan? It doesn't make sense in Big Demon decks because they didn't support Big Demon decks at all. Big Demon decks got next to no support between Kobolds and Catacombs, and like, I don't even know when the next time they actually tried to print Big Demon support was. Like fucking Whizbang's Workshop or some shit, like Ashes of Outlands. Like that's the next time they tried to print Big Demon support. So way with Dr. Morgan not being able to play with those cards. So that's already insane that they even printed Dr. Morgan to begin with. And then it's just a bad card. It just never does anything. Like, it's such a terrible effect. Nemsy is so much better than this card, and Nemsy's not even a good card. So, like, what does that say? It's just crazy. It's so crazy that they printed this card. I unpacked this card as well. Like, I'm so pissed about it. Then, lastly, of course, we have Warrior. Warrior got basically nothing for buffs. It got +1 attack and +1 health. Not even at the same time. Just Security Rover got +1 health, and Beryllium Nullifier got +1 attack. The reason this is because Warrior was by far the best class in Rise of Shadows. It's not even close. It was by far Warrior. So it's not too surprising that they did this. They didn't want Warrior to be that strong. They just... come on, what do you want? Like, Dr. Boom Mad Genius is actually one of the best cards ever. Like, I said that about Spirit Bomb, but that's because Spirit Bomb is like, oh, it's all the synergy and stuff. No, Dr. Boom Mad Genius is like one of the most dominating, powerful cards to ever exist in Hearthstone, and it's like, it was disgusting. If you played Rise of Shadows, like, during the time, it was Control Warrior, Control Warrior, Control Warrior, every single game. They nerfed so many cards just to make Control Warrior worse, and guess what? It was still the best deck in the game. It was fucking-surd. Control Warrior was just genuinely so overpowered. But yeah, that's going to be it for me. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you think down below. Do you still like any of these cards? Do you still use any of them? Do you think any of the buffs probably could have been, kept for Lunas or extra arms, things like that? And then, of course, during Rise of the Mechs, they also introduced Snip Snap. If you don't know, Snip Snap Warlock is arguably one of the most oppressive decks to ever exist. It actually could not lose games. It only ever lost in the mirror because it had the best removal in the game at the time because it's Warlock. It had the best board ever. It had the best board building ever because of Snip Snap, and it genuinely only lost the mirror. It is fucking-surd. I don't know how people think that most decks are better than this. It's one of the most broken decks to ever exist. But yeah, that's going to be it for me. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Shadows are rising again! Darker than they've ever been.